a rattlesnake. This comes from the story from the Aztecs, the Indians from Mexico. They were supposed to build a city, and they were looking for a sign where to build it. And supposedly they were looking for an eagle eating a rattlesnake. And supposedly that's what they found in Mexico City, and that's why they built Mexico City there. So if you ever visit there, watch out. Don't step on one of these creatures. So is there any hope on depression? And I've been involved with this program for more than a decade, and it is absolutely impressive what happens in that program. Basically, there's two groups of people. You have those that suffer some sort of mental health issue, and you have those people that know somebody with a mental health issue. This is how common this problem is worldwide. And this is not a cheap disease. In this study, they were documenting that somebody with depression is losing about $10,400 by year, because depression affects your ability to do your work, your ability to concentrate, your ability to have energy, your ability to have motivation, and so forth. So it not only affects up here, but starts affecting your relationships, your economics, and so forth. In fact, Journal Nature, one of the top journals in the world, recently did a review article to try to understand where are we regarding depression. And in the article, they say that you are more likely to be cured from cancer than from depression. Because today, many of the depression cases become chronic, become long-term. And in their conclusion, they say that medication must be something else from depression, because medication only helps 28% of the persons to feel cured when they are taking them. So today we're going to learn that there are other things that we can do for depression. If you are suffering this condition, I would highly suggest you participate of this 8-week program, as it is highly effective. The first time that they did statistics regarding depression was back in 1915. And since they started counting the number of depressed people around the world, statistics show that every year we get more and more cases of depression. Something that has moved also is when depression presents. A few years ago, it was at the time of the 40s, the 50s, when we would see most depression. Today, the average age happens to be 25. And statistics say that among females, 1 out of 4 of them will experience depression at some period in their lives. Among males is 1 out of 8. So how do you know if somebody has depression? Well, there is a standardized guideline called the DSM-5. This book is used worldwide to diagnose mental disorders, including depression. So basically, the guideline says that if somebody has, for at least 2 weeks, 5 out of 9 symptoms that we'll see in a minute, that's the way you diagnose major depression. So, first symptom, you have deep sadness. This symptom is represented differently among males and females. Among males, they represent this symptom by saying, you know what, doctor, there's something that is like missing inside of me. something is not right. I don't know what it is. I cannot put my finger on it, but something is not right inside of me. Among females, they represent this symptom by crying spontaneously. In fact, they come to the consultation and they say, "Doctor, I shouldn't even be crying. This little thing, it made me cry. I don't know why I'm crying so much." This is actually not a normal thing. You shouldn't be just crying spontaneously like that. Next symptom, apathy, in which the person wakes up in the morning and does not look forward to the day. That's also not a normal symptom. When you wake up in the morning, you should be enthusiastic about the day. In fact, some patients say, "Well, doctor, my problem is that I'm getting older, and old people feel like this." No, this is not the way old people feel, and this is also not a normal symptom. Next one, agitation. The person loses its patience very easy. The patient also can qualify for this symptom if they have what is called psychomotor retardation, which basically means you either speak or move too slow. So either one of those would qualify for that symptom. Next one, classic symptom of depression, sleep problems. In fact, you even know it. Patient wakes up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and what happens? They cannot go back to sleep. In fact, this happens because of the neurochemistry issues happening inside of here. There is a hormone that makes us feel good. This neurochemical is called serotonin. In fact, that night that you didn't sleep good and you were like achy and your head was like cloudy and so forth, that's because you had too little serotonin. But somebody with depression happens to have low levels on a long term. And this is what happens. Serotonin becomes melatonin at night. Melatonin is that hormone that helps you sleep deeply. So if there are low levels of melatonin, you will expect to have some issues with sleep. Sometimes the person has problems initiating the sleep. Sometimes they have problems maintaining the sleep. In fact, there's a pattern depending on the severity of the depression is how early they wake up. As they start improving, the waking up time starts to improve and so forth. Now, that's one possible extreme. The other possible extreme is what is called hypersomnia, in which the patient is sleeping too much. In fact, those are the patients that come to us, to our residential program, some of them sleeping 12, 14 hours in a day. And you know what they tell us? "Doctor, I wish I could sleep a little bit more. I'm that tired." Imagine sleeping 14 hours. I mean, you can barely function. That's enough time to just, take a shower and eat something and do a few things and your day is over. You need to go back to sleep, So either one of those extremes would qualify for the sleep problem. Next one, problems with the appetite or problems with the weight. And one extreme is the one that the person doesn't want to eat. They sit down at the table and they take 2, 3 bites and no, I'm not hungry anymore. I don't want to eat anymore. These type of people actually are very difficult to treat because it makes sense. What you eat becomes the neurochemistry up here. So if you're not eating the right food, your brain cannot make the right chemistry. In fact, this type of people, the medication doesn't even work on them because it doesn't have the building blocks to make all those chemicals that the brain needs. So that's one possible extreme. The other one is the one that the person is medicating themselves with food. They don't need to have a degree on biochemistry, but they know that if they eat certain foods, those foods make them feel better. What foods? Chocolate, sugar, white flours, cakes, and these type of things. And the person eats these foods because these types of foods temporarily increase your serotonin, but unfortunately it crashes. So you eat them, and then it makes you feel good, then you crash. And what do you need? More. And then and again, and like this. And unfortunately, all those calories end up accumulating, and the person end up having an issue with their weight. Next one, lack of concentration. The patient has problems putting their mind and focusing to what they are doing. Even simple things like decisions, they sometimes even depend on others. They go and call the neighbor and say, hey, what should I cook tonight? I cannot even think about that, and things like that. Next one, feelings of worthlessness. The person feels that they're not important. In fact, sometimes they get this wrong idea that it would be better if they're not even there, So they feel that they're not adding value to the relationship, to the work, to whatever they are involved with. And then morbid thoughts. The person is obsessed about thinking about disease, about thinking about death, about thinking about harming others or harming themselves. Okay? That is morbid thoughts. Now you can see a little bit of reflection of this. For example, today many of the surfboards and skateboards and this type of things, what kind of pattern do you see there? It's all these skulls and bones and things like those. Those are morbid thoughts. That's not something that you should be thinking all the time about it. In fact, sometimes even the patterns, isn't it, in the shirts and so forth, that's morbid thought. Or sometimes when you go to places like art galleries, some of these places, they show this paintings that are gloomy and dark and this type of things. That's a reflection of the mind of the artist. That person has morbid thoughts. That's why they paint those gloomy type of scenes. And then the last one, the symptom of fatigue, which is interesting because many times the patient won't come because of the other symptoms, but they'll come for this one. And they say, doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been going on vacation and trying to take it easy, but I have this tiredness on me that just doesn't go away. What's wrong with me? And as you start asking the questions, you start finding out that they have all these other symptoms present. So you count the 5 of them, that's major depression. Or if it's only 2 to 4 of the symptoms, is what is called a minor depression. So minor depression is when you are not completely well, but you're not completely bad. It's somewhere there in the middle that the person hangs around. So we have published this paper. In fact, if you go to that ResearchGate that I show you, you'll find the full paper there that you can read at home. And basically, this is the way that we wrote this article. We were wondering about the causes of depression. So what we did, we checked the scientific literature to see what has been published about causes of depression. And what we found more than 100 different causes of depression documented in the scientific literature. And what we did, we grouped those 100 plus causes into 10 groups. So it is our hypothesis that somebody is gonna develop depression or an anxiety if they have 4 or more out of this list of 10 that we will see in a minute. So let's go quickly to that list of 10 causes of depression. Number 1, genetic. The person is having genes from their parents or relatives. If relatives have had depression or have attempted suicide or committed suicide, there's a possibility you may have some of those genes in you. Can you do something about this? Well, you can turn off the gene, but still the gene is there, okay? So this is one that you cannot do much about it because you inherit this. Next one, developmental. This one has to do with having suffered any type of abuse when you were small, having grown up in a home of an alcoholic or a drug user, having suffered neglect when you were small, having your first menstrual period if you are a female under the age of 11. Any of those factors would qualify for developmental. So here is the good news, bad news. Bad news, you cannot do much about these two. The rest of the 8 are potentially reversible. And this is the heart of our program. We focus in our program at identifying those causes of depression and reversing them. Next one, lifestyle. This one has to do with not having a regular exercise program, not exposing yourself to bright light, not breathing fresh air on a regular basis. If you are too much inside of buildings and breathing just that air, any of those would qualify for lifestyle. Can you start an exercise program? Can you start going out more to outside? See, these are things that you can actively do. Next one, circadian rhythm. This one has to do with basically having disorder in your life. So, not having regular times for eating, not having regular times to going to bed and waking up, having insomnia on a regular basis, any of these things would qualify for circadian rhythm, which happens to be one of the most common hits among the list. Next one, addictions. Addictions would qualify if you are involved with illegal drugs, of course, but also some legal drugs, such as benzodiazepine usage, such as things like opioids, but also some socially acceptable things, such as use of alcohol, cigarettes, caffeine, and so forth. Any of those addictions can potentially have issues. We'll be talking about more about that in another lecture. Next one, nutrition. Again, this one makes sense. If you are not eating the right food, your brain cannot make the right neurochemistry. So, number one, eating too much junk food, okay, would qualify for this nutrition hit. Eating too much sugar, too much white flour, too much animal products, any of this would qualify for this. And or if you are not eating certain key nutrients. Your brain needs things like omega-3, tryptophan, iron, vitamin B6, folate, and so many other nutrients that you need to have from your food in order for your brain to make the right neurochemistry. Next one, toxic hit. It will qualify for toxic hit if you are being exposed to certain toxins that affect the nervous system. Among them include cadmium. People that work in battery factories expose themselves to this. Lead, Some people that live in old buildings, if your pipes are old, they may have lead, and as you drink water from them, you can be exposing yourself to this. Certain spices and candy from India, China, not all of them, but some of them can be contaminated with lead. And the most toxic exposure happens to be through mercury. We'll be talking about that also in another lecture further. Next one is 3 things in one. So the first one has to do with social heat. Not having regular contact with a group on a regular basis. You know, in the old days, I don't know, people used to go to church and these type of things. You would meet, you know, on a regular basis there. You would be meeting that type of need. But today's society has changed, you know. Many times a person is so busy and so forth, no times for friends and connections and so forth. So being socially isolated is not good for you. We'll talk about that also in another lecture further. Next one, complicated stress, in which the person has this chronic type of stress. You know, the work is stressful and the boss is mean and this type of things. Or the relationship, you know, are not good. So that chronic type of stress can create problems. Next one, grief. You suffer an important loss in your life, a dear person, a job, a special object, something very dear to you, you lost it, and you have not been able to overcome that loss. Any of those 3 would qualify for that 8 hit. And then we have the exception of the rule. We said you need how many? 4 or more out of this list of 10 to develop depression, but this is the exception of the rule. This one by itself can trigger depression. What will qualify for this? If you have certain medical problems such as a diabetes not well under control, autoimmune conditions, liver problems, kidney problems, certain viral problems, you need to control this medically speaking, then the depression will improve. But the most common medical condition that we find in consultation happens to be thyroid problems, okay? Or other hormone problems, but the thyroid happens to be the most common one. And finally, the number 10 hit, the frontal lobe hit. The frontal lobes of the brain is where depression is seated. If you analyze a brain under depression, the frontal lobe of the brain has too little activity. Basically, 2 groups of things would affect this frontal lobe. Number 1, if you're doing certain behaviors that suppress the frontal lobe of the brain. Just as an example, one of them, doing things that go against your conscience, for example, that suppresses your frontal lobe. Beware, you need to live according to what you believe is right and wrong. So doing things that go against the frontal lobe, we'll talk about this in a future lecture, but also not doing things to improve the frontal lobe function can also qualify for that. So here is the heart of our program. Basically, that's what we do. We zoom in on the problems and then we encourage the person to start making those changes. How effective this program is? 95% of the people that identify this and start doing these changes are going to get well. What about the 5% that doesn't improve? Those are the ones that I call the disobedient patients. Here we are, you know, telling them, change your diet, do your exercise, go to bed early, and so forth. They don't want to do it. You think it's going to work? No, isn't it? You need to do your part. And that's the beauty of this 8-week program that you were listening a minute ago. Because it's 8 weeks The changes are not all at once. So you start making those changes little by little, week by week, and by the time you get to the 8th week, you are doing fantastically great as you're dealing with most of your issues. So that's why that program is not only for people with depression, but also people that want to avoid depression, if you want to start to establish those healthy behaviors in your life. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many diseases from which men suffer are the result of what? Mental depression. Grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust, all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. That's why it's so important that we deal with that mental health side of things. So what about suicide? Sadly, suicide affects many people today. And you know, there was a very interesting study that was done in San Francisco. I live not too far from there. San Francisco, if you have ever seen this bridge, it's a beautiful, big bridge. And it's so big that when they paint this bridge, by the time they finish, the first paint is too old. So they are constantly working on this bridge. And sadly, many people go there to commit suicide. And what they do, they stop their car on the side there, and then they jump, and it's a long ways down there to the water. In fact, believe it or not, some people actually have survived that jump. So a very wise researcher went to look for these people, to try to interview these people attempting suicide, to understand what are they thinking when they try to commit suicide. So these are some of the questions that he was asking them. First question, did you want to commit suicide? What was their answer? Yes or no? Yes, I wanted to commit suicide. Are you happy, the following question, that you didn't finish your suicidal attempt? What was the answer? Yes, I'm very happy that I didn't finalize my suicidal attempt. So he said, wait a minute. First, you're saying that you wanted to commit suicide. Now you're saying you're happy you didn't finish. When did you change your opinion? Good question, isn't it? You know what's the answer? As soon as my feet left solid ground, I realized that I had made the worst mistake in my life. And that's the thing with depression. Depression increases impulsivity. So many times, the person end up saying things that later on they regret. They go and get the credit card, man, they go and buy all kinds of things, and then not until the bill comes, hey, why did I buy these things? I didn't even need these things, because of that impulsivity that is increased. And back there on the sound system, I'm going to run a little clip. So let me show you one of these survivors.
You say the demon in your head said, all right, now's the time to jump, do it.
Yeah.
What was your next memory?
Feeling like shards of glass were piercing my skin as I fell, because the fog just turns to icicles. When you find yourself in excruciating physical pain, what's the one thing you want that pain to do?
Go away.
And when you're in so much pain that you can't breathe, you believe you have to go. If we can teach people how to be resilient in the face of pain, how to cope with the pain, and how to survive the pain, a lot more of us could stay here, inside the pain. I want to help people recognize their value, that they are worthy, and that suicide is never the solution to their problem. It is the problem.
So as you can see, we need to teach people to be resilient. We need to empower them, and that's exactly what we try to do with this program. Now, we have two programs of depression. We have a medical residential program in which you come to us, you are our patient, you stay with us, we feed you, we take you for the walks, the psychological care, the medical care, and all these different aspects. So for that one, you have to come to California to do that. But we have also done this program into a community version, which is what they're going to be running here very soon. So let me tell you a little testimony of one of our patients. This lady, Mikala, by the age of 13, she was abused by a close friend of the family. And depression started creeping in her life. And the way that she dealt with her depression was the following. She started establishing boyfriend-girlfriend relationships that would become very intimate very soon, and then she would be dumped by the boyfriend, and then she would start the cycle over and over again. Let me ask you this, did that help with her problem? No, actually started making her problem much worse. And by the time she went to seek professional help, she was put on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 psychiatric medications it took to control her severe type of depression that she had. But still, she was very smart, she was still very bright, and she was able to get a job at the local pharmacy. And as she is working there in the local pharmacy, she started cutting the eye of the manager of the pharmacy. And she started establishing a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with him. Now, this one seemed different than the other ones, you know. This one seemed to be more stable, economically better, and so forth. So when she was asked to go down to Mexico for a long weekend with him, man, she thought she was, you know, in the ninth cloud. So she goes down with him, and the next morning after they arrive, he puts his shorts and goes for a swim, and she stayed in the room by herself. And when she was there by herself, she notices that the boyfriend left the cell phone there. And curiously, she grabs the cell phone. The cell phone didn't have any code or anything, so she was able to access the thing. And immediately she goes to the gallery where the pictures were in the phone. And to her shock, she realizes that this boyfriend was going out with her co-workers of the family at the same time that she was going out with her. And from being in cloud 9, suddenly her world came to a crash. And she said, my life is over. So she took one of her bottles of pills and took the whole thing. The boyfriend was able to find her very soon afterwards, so she was able to take her on time to the hospital. They removed the medication from her stomach, and very soon, in a few hours, they sent her back to the hotel. When she is at the hotel with this boy and realizes that she's alone with him, she said, my life is over. And she takes another one of those pills, bottles of pills, but this one had a nasty side effect. This one caused severe hypotension. So became a nightmare for those physicians dealing with the case, you know, because now there was kidney failure and all kinds of problems coming in there. The boyfriend, when he sees that, he says, oops, I need to go back to America, and goes back to America and leaves her down in Mexico by herself. Now, Aunt that she had flies all the way down to Mexico to be with her. And I wanted to close showing you, as she comes to our residential program, her aunt knew about the program, so she takes it with us. And one of the things that she does, she didn't want it to be there. She still was very angry, very depressed. But very soon, after we identify the causes of her problem, she starts making the changes, starts cooperating. And very soon, in a matter of a few days, the smile of Mikala returned. And she starts telling us how she feels so good that it has been a long time since she felt so good. And as she starts cooperating the program and doing everything that is encouraged there, by the time the program was over, she was feeling great. She continues doing the changes at home. And today, Mikala doesn't take a single psychiatric medication, and she is completely depression-free. Awesome. And that is exactly what we want you guys to experience. As you identify those causes of depression and you make those changes, healing starts happening in your lives. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and we will be continuing tomorrow with the next set of interesting